My name is TJ Scott. This is my chapters 7 and 8, um, business law chapter summaries. So essentially, what we really got into was the ethics, the moral conduct, the code of ethics, and then also like social responsibility things as well as the environment. Not just the environment within a business, but also the environment around the world and how it may affect your business from the inside out. Um, So, starting with chapter 7, which was more the ethical side of things, for the most part, it's pretty self explanatory. Basically, if it's in question, then you shouldn't be doing it. If something's in question within the business, you should not be doing it and you should not be performing it. Ethics are different when it comes to businesses, they differ from employee group to employee group. Although you should act the same way, different situations entice different ethical codes as well as moral codes. You're not going to behave the same way you would as if you were a factory manager compared to maybe a bartender at a bar that also runs the place. There's just kind of a different element to those things. And with that comes social responsibility, which was also touched on. Not just social responsibility, like within um, the business, but also around the business. How much can you offer to the community? Different things like that. Basically, the social responsibility of a business is within the society, and then political influence was also involved in this, which I found interesting because um, it's something that's really not supposed to be touched on when it comes to government law or anything like that. Excuse me. Um, the code of ethics, the individual code of ethics, adopted from parents, religion, basically your own ethical code of what you're going to live by. But then within that, you have to operate a business. You can't force religion on anybody. You can't force your different teachings, your different environment on anybody. But you also have to operate your business in an aspect um, that you not only enjoy, but that you believe in. That also causes some issues, some conflict. And that was part of the chapter, the conflict between these things. Um, the code of ethics was a big part of this chapter. Something really complicated. It's really, really hard to view without something directly in front of you. For example, something like a situation that could arise with religion. Maybe a company is forcing religion on somebody, or a manager specifically is forcing religion upon somebody. That's something to handle up front within that business, depending on whether or not that manager is directly related to corporate or there is no corporate, maybe. Maybe it's a restaurant type situation where the owner is also the manager and they are forcing something upon somebody or teaching them in some way that makes them feel uncomfortable or doesn't agree with their own ethical code. It's something extremely complicated that I think even the nitty gritty details when it comes down to situations like this need to be analyzed. And obviously that changes for big corporations, like for example Nike. They have certain policies put into place that maybe your small mom and pop shop might not have. But these ethical codes, morals, these values still have to be practiced. Um, and in those mom and pop shops, those smaller areas that don't have policies put into place, that's kind of complicated. It's kind of up to the person, and you kind of have to operate by, if I think that this may be in question, then I probably shouldn't be speaking upon it. So a lot of that, chapter 7 was ethics. Um, Very complex topic to discuss without situations right in front of you. And chapter 8 was environment. The environment not only of your business, but also political, economical, international business, corporations, trade, and then also diving into like how law is being forced upon treaties. this was a lot involved with the homework, kind of discussing how different arbitration methods may be used when it comes down to treaties with different countries or even companies that are working with different companies in other countries. This was also something really complicated, but what this came down to was a lot of precedents. Reading through the book, there was a lot of precedent cases that dealt with whether it be a world organization like the EU, something like that, working directly with a company, say a U.S. company, and how they were going to handle those things. Um, Another big thing in this chapter was trade, which came down to a lot of different clauses, a lot of different laws. Um, Trade's another thing that's really complicated to me personally. The trade laws are so different around the world, but yet they all interact within each other's countries. You know, we do trade with a lot of different countries, and other countries trade with us. It's an agreement. I'm not sure how the agreement is decided upon. I'm not sure how it works, but the chapter touched on that a little bit, essentially looking into the different clauses and which country may control uh, different franchising methods or licensing, as well as ports. You know, how are you going to transport these things in and out? Another thing it looked at was investment. Basically, how much or how little, and then also how are you going to invest in foreign markets and how important that may be or may not be, and whether or not it's legal uh, within international waters or moving money over, uh, dependent upon that country's laws in comparison to your country's laws. Um, Export import controls was another thing looked upon. I kind of touched on that before. Basically, what's going to be accepted, what's not going to be accepted, and then also what can you send, and what do you got to be weary of when it comes down to the law and legality of things. The World Trade Organization was touched upon, which basically looks over taxes, tariffs, trade laws, makes sure that the decision making process is proper from both ends, and it also cooperates with both sides of the law, depending upon what countries. There was also a few different trade agreements covered within this chapter. Different things like, are you allowed to work with this within this trade commission? Um, Basically, are if you're allowed to send things to the U.S., are those things now allowed to be sent to Mexico or Canada? Uh, Different things like that. Yeah, chapter 7 and 8 were a lot of there were a lot of differences because I view chapter 7 as a chapter that is kind of up to you when it comes to ethical code, morals, values. Obviously, everybody's going to be raised differently. Even if it's in the same household, you can be raised differently. And I view chapter 7 as more as an opinion thing, but when it comes down to it, you can still get in trouble with the business law aspect of things. And chapter 8 is a lot of precedents. It's a lot of hardcore policies, rules, and laws that you have to follow, or else you could be under federal jurisdiction of pretty much any country with you're doing business with, and depending upon the clauses, the arbitration process within the agreement, you could be in some serious trouble. So both chapters were very different according to what I learned about them, but both very interesting. Thank you.